Okay, last month, friends, we found ourselves in this very room learning from Dr. Rodney Sadler about liberation theology, its origins and applications. And I hope that you had robust small group conversations after that time together, and I hope that you've come back eager to learn more. Tonight we have the honor of learning from Reverend Dr. Tarsha Banister. Tarsha and I met in Washington, D.C. about a year ago as part of our work with CBF Global's Thriving Congregations initiative. And I knew instantly, I won't speak for her, but I knew instantly that I'd met a soul sister and a lifelong friend. And when we're not hanging out together in D.C., Tarsha is an associate minister at Temple Memorial Baptist Church in the Piedmont Triad area, and she is a congregational consultant with the Center for Congregational Health. She is a lifelong learner. So far, she has earned a Bachelor of Science degree from North Carolina Central University, a Master of Adult Education from Walden University, a Master of Divinity from Wake Forest Divinity School, the best divinity school in all the land, and a doctorate degree from Duke Divinity School, a close runner-up, but slightly inferior divinity school in all the land. But tonight, Tarsha is going to share some of that knowledge with us as we focus on womanist theology and the intersections of womanist thought and her work with individuals with HIV. So please join me in welcoming Tarsha Banister.
And Pastor Chrissy, you are absolutely right. It was love at first sight, I have to tell you. We met, and I don't know, you know how you meet people and you just connect, and so it was that. And so I am humbly honored to be with you all tonight. Can I just be honest with you all before we get into this work? I am a Raleigh native, and I feel like I'm amongst my people. The kitchen is smelling right. I have witnessed the fried chicken and all the goods that go along with it. I'm a true Southern girl, and so I feel right at home. And I honestly, my family actually lived in this area before it sprawled into what it is now. So I have deep roots to this area. My grandmother and my brother and my father and his siblings, 12 of them, they lived out in this area. My grandmother stayed around the corner from here, and I actually got to drive past her house, God rest her soul. So I got to stop by there, and of course I had my moment, but I'm just thankful to be able to be at home in Raleigh. This is God's country, I believe in my heart. God resides in Raleigh and nowhere else. I love this area. I'm very fond of this area, and this is where I got my foundation. I won't expound on that. You all have to bring me back so I can share about it later, but I'm thankful to be able to be here with you tonight. But let's jump in because time is of the essence, and I believe that God wants to speak through me to you all to share about this. I don't want to make any assumptions in that no one in here knows anything about womanist theology, but we're going to talk about it. And so let's dive in. And I can't see. All right, there we go. So you have your handouts in front of you, and we're just going to have a little conversation and talk a little bit. So you might be asking, what is womanist theology? Does anyone in here have, aside from Chrissy and my classmate, Christian, anybody else that hadn't gone to divinity school have an idea of what womanist theology is? All right, good. That's why I'm here. So womanist theology was developed as a response, if I move you can't hear, okay, cool. All right, was developed as a response to the limitations of feminist and Black liberation theology, okay? So we're gonna get into the why of all of that, right? But it is centered on the experiences and the struggles and faith of Black women. And hence, that's why I'm here today, right? I'm a Black woman, everybody can see that, right? Y'all see, I'm Black. We always say we don't see color, but we do, and it's okay, all right? And then the third thing is, in 1982, Alice Walker, she coined and expanded in theological discourse, she coined this phrase, womanist theology, right? But then later on, I'm gonna get into it with Katie and some of the other scholars, they expanded the theological content of this discourse And it is so amazing what they were able to name through their lived experience about what this experience meant for them as womanists, okay? Oh boy. It's you? Okay. So, Alice Walker defines womanist as such: a Black woman who is committed to the survival and wholeness of her people, and also someone who values women's culture, strength, and spirituality, and also a person who is serious and loves deeply, embracing both struggle and joy. And many have said, this is also coined by Alice Walker, womanism is to feminism as purple is to lavender. If you think about the color purple, not the movie, but the actual color purple, you know, purple has hues, that's not quite purple, but you know, purple has rich tones, right? I wish I knew your name. Tell me your name. Tony. So everybody see Tony's shirt. It's kind of purple, right? But then I see, what's this person's name back here? Deanna has on lavender. So it's still in the same color family, but the hues of it are different. Does that make sense, everybody? Y'all with me? All right, good. So the origins, now I know that's not, there it is. I was like, Latinx, you're what now? You're rolling it back? Oh, so I don't need to click? Oh, well that's, all right, so now we're on one accord. All right. Oh, down right here? Okay. I can walk around, okay. All right, cool. Since I know I have a clicker back there, I didn't know that. All right. So the origins of womanist theology are rooted in, as I stated before, the lived experiences, right, of Black women in America. Inspired again by Alice Walker's definition of womanist in her book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. I'll say it again, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. This is where the origins of this word came from in this book. And it was actually developed academically in response to the exclusion of Black women's voices in feminist theology, and guess what, y'all? In Black liberation theology. Black liberation theology was exclusive of this thought in terms of womanist theology. And so the scholars at B said, we're gonna do something about this. Our voices need to be in this conversation. So I wanna take a minute to talk about womanism versus feminism and some of the key differences. We're not gonna go deep tonight. This is just some surface conversation. Historically, feminism is centered on white women's experiences and concerns, okay? Whereas womanism approaches this holistically, and it incorporates race, gender, class, and spirituality. Womanism embraces communal survival and the spiritual wholeness rather than only gender equality. So if you know anything about feminism, you know that feminism has its aim, and you're learning tonight that womanist theology has a different aim. So it's an expansion. Remember, purple, Miss Tony, and then Deanna, lavender. So there's hues. We're still in the family. We're all still women, but we're talking about our different lived experiences, right? So the next slide I want to talk to you about is some of the pioneers in this work. So we know that Alice Walker coined this phrase, womanist, or womanism, in her book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens. And then we know that academically this work was expanded by some scholars. And we're gonna talk a bit about some of these powerful women in a few minutes. So the first person I want to highlight is Katie Cannon. And all of these ladies have their PhDs, and most of them went to Union, which your dear pastor is an alum of as well, went to Union Theology. Union, it's a seminary? Union Theological Seminary. in New York. So Katie Geneva Cannon, ethics and liberation was her focus. Then we have Dolores S. Williams, focused on the survival and Hagar story in The Sisters in the Wilderness, which is a book, and I have all of this noted for you so you can research this on your own. Jacqueline Grant focused on Christology from a Black woman's experience and perspective, and then Emily Towns, who was a native of North Carolina by way of UNC, I say UNC, but by way of Chapel Hill. Emily Towns focused on the cultural production of evil and social justice. And then last but not least, Kelly Brown Douglas, who focused on sexuality, race, and theology. Let's dive a little bit deeper. So the first person I want to really expound upon is none other than the renowned mother of liberation theology, who I named as such, is Katie Geneva Cannon. Cannon was a pioneer in womanist ethics, emphasizing the moral and ethical agency of Black women. Her work focused on how Black women navigate oppression and create ethical frameworks that prioritize justice, resilience, and liberation. In her book, Black Womanist Ethics, 1988, Cannon challenged traditional theological ethics by centering Black women's lived experiences. And so this thought is unheard of. 1988, that was not that long ago. I was about 10 years old. So it's 2025, somebody who's a mathematician, 1988. How long ago was that? Okay, so that was a long time. 37. All right, that's why I asked y'all. Okay, too much fried chicken. All right, 37, so 37 years ago. So 88, just think about this thought being introduced into academia, right? And so you're talking about Black women bringing their lived experience into the academy, which is predominantly white, right? Eurocentric, and so we are aware of that. And so this was groundbreaking work for her to be able to do this, but taking a risk. And we're gonna play the video so that you can hear it in her voice, what this meant for her personally. Secondly, we have Dolores Williams. Again, all of these women are PhD scholars. And Dolores, again, is known for her book, Survival and Hagar's Story, in Sisters in the Wilderness. It is a great and wonderful read. Williams argued that traditional Christian atonement theology does not adequately address the lived realities of Black women. In her book, Sisters in the Wilderness, she used the biblical story of Hagar as a model for survival, highlighting how Black women forge paths of resilience in oppressive conditions, okay? And lastly, she emphasized the importance of survival theology over suffering theology. And I don't want to get on the bandwagon of all of that, but the Black woman's story in terms of all of the ways in which we are called to show up in our families, corporate, work, in our communities, this notion needed to be written about so that people could understand, and so that people like myself who would come along would be able to identify and have someone help them make sense of themselves and their story. So I'm so thankful for their work and their contribution to this scholarship. Thirdly, we have Jacqueline Grant. Grant critiqued traditional Christology for its male-centered perspectives and introduced a Black feminist Christology. In White Women's Christ and Black Women's Jesus, penned in 1989, she explored how Black women relate to Jesus as a liberator who understands their suffering. This connects to liberation theology, but it is an expansion of that from a Black woman's perspective, okay? She called for a theological reexamination that affirms Black women's spiritual experience. And then fourthly, we have Emily Towns. Now, Towns explored how cultural narratives shape oppression and systemic injustice. In Womanist Ethics and Cultural Production of Evil, 2006, she analyzed how stereotypes and cultural images contribute to societal oppression. And her work urges theologians to challenge these narratives and advocate for social justice. And lastly, Kelly Brown Douglas. Douglas focused on the intersection of race, sexuality, and religion, particularly addressing homophobia and Black identity. In her book, Sexuality and the Black Church, penned in 1999, she confronted the Black church's attitudes towards LGBTQ+ individuals, and her scholarship continues to bridge Black liberation theology, which we talked about earlier, with womanist thought, advocating for an inclusive and justice-centered theology. Now I want to take a moment and pause right there. Any questions with anything that I've laid out so far? Just giving you some perspectives from the main contributing scholars. There are others, but for the scope of this work right now, we're just going to focus on primarily those 5 scholars. So you have Katie Cannon, Dolores Williams, Jacqueline Grant, Emily Towns, and Kelly Brown Douglas. So now I want to focus on the contemporary applications of womanist theology. So social justice movements advocating for Black women's voices in the church and society is one way in which womanist theology is present with us today, as well as the intersectionality in theological education and preaching. And lastly, expanding narratives in biblical interpretation, ethics, and spirituality. I'm gonna take a close here and wrap this up in this portion of the presentation. I want you to know that womanist theology expands, again, the traditional theological discourse by centering Black women's faith experiences in the center, okay? It challenges both racism and sexism within religious spaces, and also it remains a growing and evolving field that calls for justice, survival, and wholeness. Now, I'm gonna set this up. We're gonna watch a video. It's about 12 minutes, but I want you to hear the journey to liberation, the legacy of womanist theology from the scholars that I actually just talked to you about. And you're gonna get to hear their lived experience and how it informed their passion and ignited their call to write about this. Because we know if we don't write it, it's not a part of history. And so they are contributing scholars to this work, and we're gonna take a minute and listen to this video. Are we ready? It is on YouTube. If you just type in Journey to Liberation, the Legacy of Womanist Theology, I'll keep talking. I can do that while you get the video. So what I'll do is, are you good? Give you one second. Okay, cool. All right. So I'll take a leap of faith and go a step ahead. And when you're ready, just wave at me. So the next slide, I wanted to spend some time to talk about my introduction to women's theology. So as Chrissy stated, I am a native and so in the spring of 2018, before COVID, I was in a theology course at Wake Forest with my esteemed professor, Michelle Walsh-Roberts. I think Christian and I were in the same class together. I think we took theology together. And so I'm in class, and Michelle says, you know, we're going to talk about all these different types of theology. Now listen, I am Baptist born, Baptist bred, but I've never been in divinity school. And divinity school is not Sunday school. Oh my God, I forgot. All right, thank you. I don't do well. Okay, I got a mic. And so you all know that Sunday school is not divinity school. So anyway, so I'm in theology class, and she's talking about all of these different theologies, and my mind was blown. This was my first semester. I don't know who advised me to take theology my first semester, but the joke was on me, clearly, because I was kind of lost. And then she introduced womanist theology, and she started talking about Katie Cannon and Jacqueline Grant and all of these people. And y'all, my mind was blown, because I had never heard about Black women talking about Jesus. Remember, I'm Baptist, I'm Southern, we're in Sunday school, and we're reading the scripture, and that's about it, right? And so she starts talking about these scholars, and I fall in love, and I read Dolores Williams' work, and I was like, oh my gosh, someone has written about my lived experience as a Black woman. So we fast forward that semester, I got an invitation from none other than Dr. Melva Sampson, who was our homiletics professor, and she said, hey, I want to offer you the opportunity to go to the inaugural Womanist Conference in Virginia. And I said, okay, who's gonna be there? And she said, Katie Cannon, and she started naming all these people. So y'all, I started, for a minute I thought, like, the person that I read about in this book, I'm gonna actually get to meet her. And so long story short, you all, I went to the conference. You've heard that saying, I went to a meeting one night and my heart wasn't right. Something got a hold of me, the Baptist song we used to sing. I went to this Womanist conference, and you all, I got to meet all of those people that I named for you. I met Katie, we took pictures together. I met all of Dolores, I met all of these women. They were in the room. And I got to sit and be in that experience, and I want you to know that it changed my life. I don't know if you're able to identify with this, but when you meet someone who can help you better understand who you are, regardless of whatever race, whatever, it just helps you to get better understanding of why you do what you do, why you show up in the world the way that you do. That can be life-changing, and that's what happened for me. And so I'm going to put a pin there, and I'm going to finish telling you more about that, but let's put a pin there, and we're ready now, friend? Okay, and so you're going to get to hear from them. Now, before you press play, let me tell you this. So I met Katie and my classmates. We met her, it was like spring of 2018. I'll have you to know that next year in August, she passed. She had some aggressive form of cancer, and so she passed. So, of course, I thought, what a moment in time that I got to meet this scholar who wrote and produced information in the academy to help Black women understand what God means in their voice, from their perspective, from their context. And that is just amazing, and I'm so thankful that I had that opportunity. But I'm gonna let you listen to this video, and then we'll be back and we'll wrap it up. How y'all feeling? Wow, yeah, me too. And I've watched this probably more times than I can count, and every time I watch it, I hear something different that resonates with me. I stand on the shoulders of these women as a Black woman who is Baptist ordained and also a child of God. And so my call to this work is what I want to focus on now, because they've shared with you, and I don't need to reiterate that. They have shared with you their call to this work. I was sharing with you all that I was in a theology class, and then I went to this conference. It changed my life. And I want to name that might have been the beginning of the unfolding, unearthing of what God was calling me to do. And so having the foundational understanding of all of the different theologies that are available now. I mean, they have coffee theology now. I mean, you name it, there are all these different theologies, but having the womanist perspective theologically just unearthed another layer of myself that I didn't know was present. And so I want to fast forward to a point in my life where I graduated Wake Forest, and I left there, and I was trying to discern where God was calling me to next. And ironically, Wake Forest, they held a discerning course for you to discern whether you wanted to do a DMin, PhD, or whatever. And at that point, this was my second master's, and I was thinking, I don't have it in me to do a PhD. Like, it's just not going to happen. Especially being the fact that I was in ministry with my husband. We've been at our church almost 20 years. This weekend is our anniversary, pastoral anniversary. We've been there 20 years. I know. I'm going to take that clap. Amen. We've been there 20 years, and I needed to discern what God was doing with me. So I was like, well, I didn't even plan on going to divinity school. So let me name that. And so needless to say, long story short, I prayed about it and applied to a couple of schools. And long story short, I went to Duke. So I'm half demon, half devil, right? And so I went to Duke, and I was, preparing to do my research, and I started praying, and I had this huge idea that I wanted to do this piece around health and wellness in the Black church, again, because I went to Duke during COVID, and I saw the severity of ways in which Black people were impacted by COVID in ways that other groups were not. And that's just because situationally that, it's just if there's going to be a disparity, it's going to hit Black people first. And so my interest was there. And then I got a phone call from the dean at the time, interim dean, Dr. Shonda Jones. And she called me and she said, "Hey, I want to know, are you interested in working on this project?" And so I'm in the middle of my program at Duke. I'm actually wrapping up my coursework. And I was like, "Well, tell me more about it." She said, "Well, I'll just send you an email." And so she sent me this email, and the email contained a layout of a project that I'm currently working on. But the project was based around HIV and faith. Now, I'm in the middle of my program. I want to do health and wellness. And so long story short, I accepted the offer and I started doing the work. But before I did that, I read the statistics that were attached to the document. And one of the leading statistics that I first saw in the report is that the leading group of new cases of individuals with HIV were heterosexual Black women. So I took a minute to sit with that, and I remember sitting at my desk in my home office, and I thought about that, and I said, well, I'm heterosexual, I'm Black, I'm a woman. And the age demographic was, I think at the time, maybe like 37 to 55, and I fell in that group. And I thought, that could be me, And so I thought about it, and the more I read, y'all, I have to tell y'all, I'm a crybaby. I broke down crying. Because in my community, unfortunately, in some areas or pockets of my community, HIV is a thing of the past, and it's irrelevant, and we've moved on, and it's not a big deal. So needless to say, she offered me the job, and I took it, and long story short, that is what I did my dissertation on at Duke, and so I ended up writing about the Womanist triplex, which is a threefold office of prophet, priest, and king, and how I wanted Black leaders so desperately to embrace those models that Christ gave us in the Bible, right, as prophet, priest, and king, as a way to dismantle the harmful narratives that often come from the pulpit around HIV. In a nutshell, that's what I wrote about. And so it was very liberating, but what I didn't realize is that as I was doing the research, how the womanist lens would come into this work, right? So here I am writing, advocating, again, pleading with Black leaders, Black church folks, y'all stop discriminating against those living with HIV, because we've learned that HIV is not a singular disease. Oftentimes we don't know how people contract. It's really none of our business, right? But as a church, we cannot be exclusive. We have to be inclusive if we're going to demonstrate the love of Christ. And so long story short, I got into that work, and so I never intended on writing about HIV or working with HIV populations or any of that, but God called me. It came to me, and I believe if it comes to you, it must be yours to do. And so I just wanted to share with you all that in this day and time, there are many marginalized groups, not just Black people. There are, people now we find, that marginalization comes across race, gender, sexuality, all of that, right? And so we have to be mindful of that. And so this womanist work is absolutely essential, even in today's time. And so I wanted to share with you about my work in regards to HIV and theology. And so in that scope of work, what I often do is I work with faith leaders to dismantle the harmful narratives, as I said earlier, that often come from the pulpit in the Black church, that they often dismiss individuals who may have HIV and or AIDS, and in a way that they are excluded from being a part of church. And we know that those harmful narratives cause shame, isolation, disconnection from community. And I don't see anywhere in my Bible that I read where that is permissible. And so part of my work is helping walk alongside, if you will, faith leaders, right, to help them understand the ways in which Christ has modeled for us in the Bible, the ways in which we ought to engage one another. And not one instance can anyone ever convinced me that Christ said, well, no, you have an issue of blood. You can't come to this table. We're going to exclude you. I've yet to see it. And so that's the positionality in which, in part, the work that I do around HIV and faith. So I get to work with people who are advocates, allies, and also persons living with HIV. And so this womanist perspective helps me in many ways to be inclusive of and mindful of the ways in which I can be an ally, be an advocate, maybe sometimes just a listening ear for someone who may be doing the work to support others with HIV and or others who are living with HIV. And so that is the work that I've been called to do. I want to go to the next slide, if you will, about the Faith Compass Center. And so, ironically, Dr. Jones, Shonda Jones, dear Dean, she wrote this beautiful grant, and it was awarded and funded through the Gilead Sciences Initiative. And I think the grant was $10 million. I can't remember. It was a lot of money, a lot of money. And our work ensues, and so we focus on the southern contingent states, and we focus on rural areas where we are able to work in partnership with those who are supporting, advocating, fighting for those persons living with HIV, and also those who are trying to do, again, prevention work. And so the Faith Compass Center is based and housed at Wake Forest University School of Divinity, and which I'm a proud alum. Chrissy and Christian and I, we are proud alums. And we're excited to do this work in partnership with faith leaders across the southern states. And you all can read more about that. It's on the website is faithcompass.wfu.edu. Okay? So that's just a little bit about the intersectionality of the work that I do as a womanist scholar and also practitioner. In one vein of my life, you know, you all heard Chrissy name, I wear many hats, but that's just one of the veins that I work in. I want to just pause at this moment. Are there any questions? Nothing's off limit at this point. Any questions, observations, comments, how you're feeling, anything? I want to open the floor for that. And I think the rule is if you have something to say, you got to come to this mic. Any questions? Anybody? No? Okay, yeah.
You can probably hear me. For
Yes,
the
sir.
record. So, in this two-pronged challenge of sexism and racism,
Okay.
which is the bigger battle, or which one is farther behind the other that needs more work?
Oh my goodness, that's a loaded question. And what's your name? Bob.
I went to Wake Forest.
You went to Wake Forest. Not Div. We have a free MDiv program if you like to go. We'd be glad to have you. Dean Walker would be great. It'd be great to have you. So I think, Bob, I don't want to say either or, right? Because what I am going to automatically think about is contextually, it's going to matter based on who you're asking. If you ask an illegal immigrant right now, it might be racism, or maybe not. If you ask a black person, you know, it might be racism. If you ask a white, cisgendered female, it might be sexism. I think that question is loaded, but I think it depends on who you ask. And I don't want to get into this, I'm not going to, but given the political climate and what is taking place right now, I'm embarrassed. I think we are seeing both sexism and racism aggressively playing out in our eyes, right before our eyes, real time. And I think they're both equally aggressive, and I don't feel, from my positionality, that one is more aggressive than the other. They're equally aggressive, and that sexism impacts more people, in my opinion, in regards to how things are playing out with people losing their jobs for no reason at all. It is not just black people, it's all people, right? And so there's my spill on that, but that is my take on it. But I think all of this, unfortunately, is rooted in sin and hate. And so regardless, you heard them name those black preachers. they gave me a run for my money. And that's when I became radical. It was her own people. And so I don't think we can lean one way or another racially in regards to sin and hate, because unfortunately it is a part of all of our cultures. And until we get to the root of that, I feel that we're not going to make any progress until we're able to own our own stuff in our respective cultures. Any other questions? Anybody else want to add to that? Yes, ma'am. You are so cute. She is just cute as pie. And tell us your name.
I'm Becky, and we won't go to ageism, will we?
No, we will not. Now listen, I'm getting up there, so I could go there, but I won't. All right, go ahead, Ms. Becky.
So what's the most outlandish thing that has been said to you regarding your work, and what's the most affirming?
Okay, the most outlandish thing that has been said to be regarding HIV and faith, any aspect of my work. So I think the most outlandish thing is, honestly, I'm ashamed to say this, but I was out somewhere and someone stopped me and they were like, I don't know how we got to talking, but I go places and people come to me, it's not me. They come to me and just start talking, spilling their guts. And then, anyway, this lady, was a black lady, and she said, well, tell me what you do for a living. And I started telling her that I work with faith communities in addressing HIV and the health disparities that impact, people. And she said, oh my gosh, I didn't know HIV was still around. And I said to her, have you turned on your TV lately? And have you seen the Batavi commercials? Have y'all seen them? Have you paid attention? All of the medicine or medicinal commercials that are on TV lets you know that HIV is still prevalent. And so when I asked her that, she said, no. I said, well, the next time you go home and you turn on your TV, I want you to pay attention because that's your indication that HIV is still present. And so when I said that, I think she felt a bit ashamed, but that was not my intent. I just wanted her to know that it's still a prevalent issue. And unfortunately, and here's where it's going to cross cultural here, unfortunately, ignorance and not knowing can be more detrimental than someone pulling out a weapon and shooting you because you're essentially operating against a lack of knowledge. And if you don't know, you're not informed. You're not well informed. And so that's part of my work as well, is to educate pastors and communities around the importance of this. Now, there's a list of health disparities that we could cover for our community, just because genetically and socially, the social determinants of health, all of those things impact us in ways that it doesn't other groups. And so, but HIV is so prevalent because it's such a taboo topic, because I'm gonna say this word, are there children in here? No. We don't like to talk about sex in church. And y'all have to invite me back for another time for that conversation. But we don't talk about sex in church, but we're all here and we know how we all got here. And so those candid conversations without implicitly being, dogmatic or, sexist, we don't have them in church. And so sometimes it just creates this taboo and people don't want to touch it, and it's, and they shy away from it. And that's where the ignorance comes into play, or the lack of knowledge, if I could say it nicely. And so that's harmful. And so the best thing that I can say about my work is that our inaugural cohort that we hosted at Wake Forest with faith leaders in the state of North Carolina, those pastors that came into that cohort, I'll tell you, a lot of them came in. I'm gonna walk for a second. A lot of them came into the cohort they're typical pastors. I don't know what that means, but they're typical pastors, and so they're God's men. We had a few women, but they're gonna defend the gospel and all of that. And so we didn't force anything. And our goal is not to proselytize anyone or to converge them to be supporters of LGBTQIA+. That's not the aim. It's simply to educate and dismantle the biases that often come with the preaching, teaching, and et cetera. And so they came in the program and they went through all of our educational workshops and all of that. And at the end, we conducted these interviews in the studio. I got to be a news reporter, which I always wanted to be. I'm a WRAL fan, FYI. Charlie Gaddy, anybody see? Yeah, Renee McCoy, she went to Livingstone College. See, that's why I wanted to be a news reporter. But needless to say, we got to interview them, and y'all, I have to tell you, some of the information, and I can share this information with Chrissy, you all can go and actually listen or look at these podcasts. These pastors, all of that macho, stacho, typical pastor stuff, it came off, and they started talking about their convergence as a result of being in this process. So maybe they came into this work with some assumptions about persons living with HIV or assumptions about whatever. But by the time they finished this process, their hearts were open to receive and be more inclusive of people, not just one segment, but their hearts had softened. And I kept asking the team, y'all, how do we measure changes in the heart? I have scientifically. So see, this goes back to what Katie was saying. If you can't scientifically prove it, oftentimes in the academy, then it is disregarded. And so it's hard to measure change in the heart, except for when you're able to measure it maybe through an activity or a program, or maybe even in preaching and or teaching. And so that would be the highlight, I think, of my work, is that those pastors left there empowered, and a lot of them hosted events in their communities to do testing. They talked about it from the pulpit, which was real risky for some. I know, you're exactly right. It was risky for some of them. And some of them that are part of denominational associations where talking about AIDS or sex or anything political from their pulpit, they could lose their jobs. But they were willing to take a risk to help inform their people so that they would not be ignorant or have, the lack of knowledge. And so that will be a testament to our work. And the work that we do is so powerful in that we're able to capture the essence of this through all of the wonderful ways they're touching and changing lives. And I can't think of anything more rewarding, and it helps me to live into some of the vision that God has called me to, but also the Pro Humanitate motto of Wake Forest University, which I'm an esteemed alum of. I'm so proud of my divinity school because it really radicalized and changed my life, and I'm so thankful for that opportunity. And so that would be the highlight of some of my work. And we, at one point, we still do give out lots of money. And it's always great when you can support people that are doing this work, because it's not easy going and hosting and doing all that stuff. It costs money. You all know. You had to pay before you ate tonight, right? I think that's what I saw going down over here in this corner. Yeah, so ministry costs money. It's not free and it's not cheap. And so this is the same. Anybody else? Any other questions? Anything you want to ask of me? I know y'all about ready to go. But that is, in short, Womanist Theology. I have listed some resources here for you all to look at or peruse at your leisure, and I think there's a separate sheet. If you want to read any of these books, now let me tell y'all, my favorite book is by Renita Weems, and it's called Just a Sister Away, Understanding the Timeless Connection Between Women of Color. Y'all, I read that book in one day, and I cried the whole time I read it. I'd never seen anything written that helped me understand the ways in which God was calling me to be in the world. I just had never seen it. I told y'all I went to Sunday school, I went to BTU, I did all of that stuff, but nothing helped me make sense of myself like this did. And so that is probably one of my favorite books on this list. And then if you're into ethics and want to understand more about that from the Black woman's perspective, of course, Katie Cannon's book. Now, these ladies, they are heavyweights. They are brilliant. And so it may take you 2 or 3 reads to get the understanding of what they're trying to convey, but it's definitely worth your while. And so I offer that to you as a resource for you to have. And if there are no further questions, I want to thank you all for your time and, most importantly, your attention tonight. Thank you so much. And that will be my TED Talk. Thank you.